Welcome in, everybody, to Inside the Burrow. Robbie Lastella here alongside our co-host Kevin Fielder, and we are joined today by a special guest, star, I guess you can call him college basketball star at this point. If you probably know him from his YouTube videos, if not his Twitter personality. Cole Adams, how is it going, man?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk a little NIT. I've been busy with March Madness stuff, so it'd be nice to get a little bit of a break from that and kind of talk about something else.
This is the real March Madness.
Exactly. Well, folks, if you didn't know, FAU is headed to the NIT to take on Dayton, and Cole is our resident Dayton expert, fan of the Flyers as well. After the way the season ended for Dayton, are you excited for them to be playing postseason basketball, or would you rather them just kind of chalk it up and hit the portal?
Yeah, that's always a good question when it comes to each fan base at this time of the year. I know that I'm going to be in the minority. I know I'll speak for the Dayton fans. They're not really excited about this. They're very frustrated with where the program is at right now. And I feel like rightfully so, because it comes down to like their playing style. And I think they probably wouldn't want them to be playing in the postseason because, expectations at Dayton are making the NCAA tournament. But for me, I like the postseason. I'm excited to watch the NIT, and I'm excited to check out the Crown too while I'm at it. And I'm definitely in the minority. The fans are not necessarily, especially like the diehards on Twitter and X. Like they're not thrilled about it. So,
But Cole, when you have a fan base like Dayton, and as you mentioned, like deservedly so, they have the expectation of making the tournament and being competitive in the tournament. And I think outside of last year and the 2020 year where they would have almost certainly been like a 1 seed, they just haven't made the NCAA tournament under Anthony Grant. What's the vibe like around this program? I mean, because when you have a coach who coaches at this kind of program with these kind of expectations and hasn't lived up to those expectations, I imagine it's a fan base that probably wants something different.
Yeah, especially like playing style wise, that is where the huge frustration comes into play, because obviously Anthony Grant's loved. He's an alum of the school. He's brought in so much talent. I mean, Toumani Camara is, people overlook him when it comes to like Deron Holmes, who was one of the best players in college basketball last year, Obi Toppin, National Player of the Year. Even Toumani is doing incredible in the NBA, and like, that's where I feel like a lot of people are just getting frustrated because it's like they've brought in talent, but they just haven't been able to, win. And they haven't won an A-10 tournament since I think the year was 2003. That's a huge frustration amongst the fans, is that they just can't seem to get it done in the A-10 tournament to just get the auto bid. They're always having to rely on, getting kind of lucky, making the NCAA tournament. They were the first team out, I believe, in 2022. So it's just, there is frustrations, and it's definitely, it's hard because I love Anthony Grant. He's very beloved. So, but it's just like watching the team play basketball. I think that's where the real frustration comes into play, is like their playing style.
Yeah, it's kind of similar right now, obviously a little bit different because FAU has first-year head coach, but at the same time, the expectations of the FAU fan base are all over the place. Some people are obscene that the Owls did not make the NCAA tournament this year. Some people are elated that there's postseason basketball and they're going to get to hang a banner regardless. I think that's cool, though, that there's mid-major fan bases strong enough, both with Dayton and FAU, to really kind of, make them care a little bit. And that's what's going to make these NIT games matter a little bit more, in the sense of, sure, a win over a Power 5 program would be nice and something you can hang your hat on. But if you're playing against another mid-major who's kind of fighting to try to, win something, it's going to make for good basketball. And I think that's what this game's going to be. I haven't watched a ton of Dayton basketball this season. Kevin, have you caught any Dayton hoops this year?
I've watched very little, but I do sort of agree with their fan base that play style that they have, I think they play way too slow for Dayton. We could play a little bit faster.
Yeah.
So, Cole, that's what you'd say. They have a slower style of offense and tempo?
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. And then sometimes, the players, they're very like vibe based. So when things do not go well, they really get stuck, and they're usually like a type of team where sometimes they get down, and it's the momentum that brings them kind of back into it that they kind of feed off of. But like, sometimes they just get caught in these weird A10 matchups that they just can't seem to go out there and just take care of business. Like especially going on the road, for example. I mean, like home games are great because the place sells out. It's loud. It's always a home court advantage. But it's also just been a really up and down season because, I mean, if you remember in Maui, they looked really good. Like they had, obviously, they almost beat North Carolina. They almost beat Iowa State, and then they beat Connecticut. And all three of those teams are in the NCAA tournament. Then they beat Marquette. Marquette came to the UD Arena, and they beat them. So it's just, it's frustrating because like right after all of that had happened in early December, they go on a losing streak to start out A10 play, and they just couldn't really ever get control of the A10. And honestly, watching teams like VCU and George Mason, who is also like on their side of the bracket, just play a little bit harder for their coach. It's just a little frustrating. At least that's kind of like what the fans are saying, especially like the hardcore ones.
This game is going to be completely two different styles. Like Dayton 269th with an average possession length of 18.3 seconds. That's close. I mean, it's not North Texas slow, but FAU 16.4 seconds, 49th in the country. So it's really going to be two opposite teams. But that's fun. I mean, in the NIT, I mean, that's what you'll get. You'll get a little bit of contrast in styles. I'm interested to kind of see who kind of controls the tempo in this game. And if Dayton comes on the road here really fired up trying to win, you mentioned playing a little bit harder for, VCU and George Mason. Well, let's see if Dayton can come out in Boca kind of fired up and win this game, or if they're just taking a beach trip because their home court is being used.
Yeah. I think the players will still give like an effort. I think they do have something to play for. It's just the fans are frustrated because, the expectation is to make the tournament. And also, even some fans might even want a coaching change, for example, and maybe the administration sees them potentially, if they go on a run in the NIT, win the NIT, they might just keep carrying on with kind of how things are at the moment. I think that's where like the frustration comes from.
Cole, I know that Dayton has a few guys who are still talented basketball players. Like you mentioned Anthony Grant bringing in talent. Like this is still an incredibly talented basketball team. And I know two guys that I've watched, Malachi Smith and Nate Santos. Like I loved Nate Santos at Pitt. I was incredibly excited when they added him from the transfer portal. And Malachi Smith, to his credit, is one of the best playmakers in college basketball. Does the offense sort of go through those two guys, or are there other guys who sort of carry the load on that side of the ball?
Yeah, for sure. Nate Santos is definitely like their go-to, guy. Also, point guard Enoch Cheeks. That's also their go-to scorer as well.
What a name!
Yeah. Well, he's a huge fan favorite. Like, he definitely puts out an effort every single night. So, like, the fans definitely are like gravitate towards him. So, and then like they brought in Zed Key, who was at Ohio State. He's their center. Now they're obvious, and then they lost Kobe. I mean, if you guys don't remember, Kobe Brea was on the team last season, and then transferred to Kentucky. So if he was still on the team, they probably would have been an NCAA tournament team. Just another shooter for them that they could have had. So I definitely, are we projecting yet? Because I still think I kind of like how the bracket is shaping up for them. It's just George Mason is the 2 seed on their side, and that's a tough matchup because George Mason came into UD Arena and won earlier in the season. So that's going to be like, all right, let's see. I think that could be a turning point for the fans too. Just seeing George Mason become good now under Tony's skin.
On that topic, I was looking at sort of the end of their season, their regular season in particular. They beat VCU on the road. They beat St. Louis at home, right? Like they pick up good wins down the stretch. Was there sort of a sense that could have been the difference heading the A10 tournament, and then to see them lose so quickly in the A10 tournament, right? Like,
yeah,
what was the difference between the regular season and whatever happened in the A10 tournament?
I know, man. It's just that's where it's like so frustrating too, and that's where the fans, rightfully so, are very annoyed because, I mean, even like besides just like playing style, Dayton is trying to like potentially pivot their way into playing in the Big East. And I feel like they just didn't necessarily capitalize on the past couple of years of momentum that they could have had to make the jump. So I think that's where more frustration comes in from the fans. But yeah, they looked better. And then once again, because last year in the A10 tournament, they lost their very first game in the exact same matchup against Duquesne. And then Duquesne goes on to win the A10 tournament. So it's just like the St. Joe's game, they just couldn't necessarily get control. And it's just like they just don't show up when they need to. And then even in their NCAA tournament game last year against Nevada, they had to mount that late comeback that looked extremely improbable. That shouldn't have happened. And they ended up coming back and winning the game. And it's just like, they just can't get, the momentum going. And that's where I'm talking about with like the vibe thing that, yeah, they're always in a unique situation. I do understand the fans' frustrations.
For anyone wondering, they were down 16 points with 7 minutes left in the second half against Nevada last year. And somehow, by the grace of the basketball gods that shine down on them, found a way to win.
They literally, if I remember correctly, if you look at, they showed the graphic on the broadcast, they played a perfect, because, they still played their slower, bring the ball up the court. They made everything they needed to. It was a perfect comeback, I believe. So
I'm looking at the Ken Pom win probability, and they had Dayton as 1.5% win probability with 7 minutes left in the second half.
Yeah.
And then you look at Nevada has close to 100% for the entirety of the second half, and then it just dips.
It was unreal, that's for sure.
What happened?
Also in that game was former FAU player Keenan Blackshear, just for anyone wondering. He was certainly a basketball player in that game.
I forgot about him. But you mentioned the Big East, and it got me wondering, what happened to Posh Alexander? Why is he having a bit of a down year this year at Dayton compared to – he's had double figures the rest of his career, and is he just more of a role guy on this Dayton team?
Yeah, and they were bringing him off the bench. So, and that's kind of like the role he's played just all season. And he just didn't necessarily live up to what fans were kind of expecting. They're a very guard-oriented team, so they've got lots of options. It's just they're not necessarily all the biggest type of guards like Javon Bennett and Malachi Smith. They are smaller. And, that's just Anthony Grant can sometimes just get stuck in his own ways a little bit. They did start, they had a big man that they started rotating in more into, I believe Latong was a freshman, or as a freshman, and they started playing him more. So that was encouraging because they did start changing things up. But, yeah, he just didn't live up to the expectations. So
you mentioned Latong, and they are still, even with a 7'1" player, they are still 300th in average height. How do they deal with teams that are sort of longer in the front court? Because FAU, you look at Baba Miller, you look at Matas, they have guys who are 7 feet, 6'10", who can play a certain way. How does Dayton deal with those kind of teams?
Yeah, that is something that happens, is their guards definitely can get overwhelmed. And that has definitely been the reason they've lost certain games this season. So they do struggle. They definitely Zed Key definitely plays in the post. But yeah, that they just get overwhelmed, especially their smaller guards, because they're not a very big basketball team.
I was gonna, I'm wondering who for FAU, Kevin, is gonna step up on the perimeter defensively. With the way that Devin Vanterpool played in his last game, I think he's got to be a guy to receive more minutes, especially considering there's a with what he showed in that game against Tulane. I hope it's not a fluke, but I hope it's more of what's going to be happening in the future. And if he can contain Cheeks on the perimeter, then it's going to come down to, obviously somebody's going to have to – I'm interested to see the matchups of Carroll and Santos and Caleb Glenn and Santos as well, and kind of see how FAU combats that.
Yeah, my take on this is that teams should treat the NIT as effectively like a college football bowl game, in the sense that you give some younger guys who maybe are rotational players but don't get a ton of minutes an opportunity to play the game, right? Because – truth be told, this isn't the NCAA tournament, right? And it is an honor to play and represent your school in it, but this isn't the NCAA tournament. And the stakes of winning this are not as high as winning the NCAA tournament. So like, yeah, I'd play Vanderpool more. I'd play like Nico Moretti more. I'd give those guys minutes. And
maybe we see Jaquel Powell for the first time. I doubt it.
I doubt we see like Jaquel Powell or Max or any of those guys in a game like this. But like, I would give the guys who are sort of give them more minutes. Like Ken Evans, Kiki Tandy, right? Like they are good basketball players and they played well this year. But like, I'd rather see what the young guys can do if we only play one more game this season.
Speaking of Tandy, I mean, I don't know I don't know how much it's been publicized. I've talked about it a little bit, and it's been in the press conferences, but he's been dealing with shin splints that are just brutal. If you look at, I forgot which leg it's on, but you can tell if you look at his legs, one is massive and one is still muscular, but not as just blown up. And I feel bad just with the way that, he caught some slack at times this season, but he kind of hit that injury. And so he was really in pain against Tulane. He only played about 20 minutes and they did it sparingly. I don't think we see him in this game. We might see Ken Evans a lot though. But we might see Tandy too. He might really want to play. That's the thing about the NIT. I mean, a lot of these guys, I mean, I don't want to read into it too much, but Tandy put out like a thank you post. Glenn signed with an agent and put out a season recap video. So it's kind of like right there in the middle. I know Wichita State had some guys who already went home. So this is going to be like a weird NIT for sure.
I would imagine FAU. I know Jacobs will talk about it, I'm sure. Wink, wink, Robbie asked him about this. I bet they were blindsided by it.
Yeah.
They probably did not expect to be in the NIT. Now, speaking of this bracket, because Cole did mention George Mason in this bracket, or I guess their side of the bracket, that might be the toughest bracket of the NIT. That little pool from Dayton down to like George Mason, Middle Tennessee, who was good in the conference tournament, North Alabama, who almost made the NCAA tournament for the first time, right? Like, are we all in agreement that's the best side of the NIT bracket, outside of like maybe the ones with a high major team that isn't a very good high major team, truthfully?
I think so.
I would agree. Yeah, for sure.
It's just kind of tough because you don't know who necessarily is going to be, playing full force, right? Like I like a bracket where SMU and Oklahoma State are, playing full force against Wichita State, who was, really down the stretch here, one of the better teams in the AAC. But as I mentioned, I know guys for Wichita State already started going home. SMU and Oklahoma State, how do they really feel about being the only power teams in this? I mean, I know there was somebody else. Georgia Tech was in here too, but still, is that side of the bracket going to live up to its potential? That's something I'm interested in. If not, then yeah, I'd have to agree that one is with Dayton and everything.
I mean, I don't think Oklahoma State's a very good basketball team. They were under 500 for a reason.
Yeah, but they got some talent. They don't have a ton, but they got enough talent to where they could make some noise in this team if they're playing full force. Now, that's what we need to see. I mean, I'm interested to see how FAU comes out. I mean, FAU, from everything I've seen this season, doesn't give me the sense of a team that's going to come out here and lay an egg. They're going to give it their best shot. I know Jacobs was not happy about the season ending. He's big into this team. He loves the team, obviously, as he should. But it's going to be tough to rally the guys for a game that, like Kevin mentioned, it's not the most important thing. But if they can get some momentum out of it, it is. Cole, I want to ask though, what do you think, first of all, that Dayton is going to come out of this game fired up and actually trying to win? And if they do, what do they need to do to be successful and bounce back from some struggles they had in the tournament?
Not getting into like a hole, I would say that would probably be like number one. I do think they'll still try. Like, I think that they'll definitely be motivated. In fact, it'd be a very Dayton thing for them to go on and win the NIT. They've done it before. I believe 2010 or 11. It was less like they won the NIT then. So yeah, I definitely think they'll give a good effort. Again, like I said, I think they can probably get past FAU. I think they can get past either Middle Tennessee or Chattanooga. and then it will probably come down to George Mason. So which would be an interesting matchup because they've had their number before. George Mason has on Dayton.
Is that game going to bring PTSD to the entirety of Dayton fans when
if they're watching? It's like I wonder if they'll end up even tuning in. I'm sure they will because obviously they're Dayton fans and they're so passionate. But yeah, definitely. That'd just be another thing to set the fans off is if they lose to another A10 team, even in the tournament. It's just like only that's such a Dayton thing. They can't even win a tournament because
they have to play an A10 team. I have learned very brief interactions with Dayton fans that they don't really care if you lose in non-conference play against a top 10 team. They're fine with that. If you lose to North Carolina, they're like, you know what? We gave it our best shot. If you lose to an A10 team, it doesn't matter who it is. It is like DEFCON. I think it's DEFCON 0 is like the worst one. I could be totally wrong. It's like the worst thing that's ever happened to that fan base, and I respect the hell out of it. A fan base that's willing to be like, yeah, we can't lose to any A10 team ever is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, the A10's got a cult following. It's a mini version of the Big East, so they're very online. They're very passionate, and it's just a niche thing. And
I think
a lot of
I think it was the UMass loss where like I just saw their entire fan base being like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened.
The UMass loss was definitely like, all right, this is not good because that was right after George Washington, which was like one that you could have seen them dropping because like sometimes they'll play I think it might have been an 11 a.m., 11:30 a.m., or maybe it was noon on a Saturday. Like, they always get trapped in a weird away game, but it was right after that they go up to UMass and lost too. So it's just like, and UMass was horrible this year. So it's just like,
it was a noon tip against George Washington.
Against GW, yeah. So it's just like, they just get trapped in these just weird games. And it's like, if they're going to want to move to the Big East, you can't drop those. So that's where the frustration comes from.
Kevin, what do you think FAU needs to do in this game if they're going to fight off a Dayton team that's going to be, trying to prove something here down the stretch?
I think we saw it in the AAC tournament. You have to dictate the tempo, right? Like you have to play to your pace, not play to Dayton's pace, because FAU, like to their credit, when they play fast and they're able to get the ball in transition, they look like a good basketball team. When they try and play slow in the half court, they just don't have the dudes to do it, I think. And a lot of it is that they don't have a guard who can really penetrate. Outside of like Moretti and stretches, outside of like Ken Evans, to his credit, has done decent at it. But like, I don't think they have a dude who's like an elite penetrator at the guard position. And so a lot of it's just like trying to find a way to get the ball into the low post and hope you can generate something off of it. And like, that's probably a very inconsistent way to win basketball games in general. And I think that's the reason why like we're not talking about them being an NCAA tournament team this year, is because it's very difficult to beat good basketball teams. And Dayton, despite the frustration, is a solid basketball team. It's hard to beat these teams when you're trying to generate so much of your offense in the half court by just throwing the ball into the low post and hoping that your 7-footer or your Baba Miller or someone can just generate offense off of it.
Yeah, and the inconsistent shooting from three has really plagued them. I mean, and for the free throw line, to their credit, they did a lot better against Tulane at the line. But, I mean, you're not going to win shooting 20% from three, 50% from the free throw line. And this game is, I mean, it's going to come down to will, right? If they're find themselves down early, and are they going to have the will to, get to the line, hit their free throws, find a way to get open looks from three and hit them? We'll see. I mean, I think they're going to give it their all. There's been no point really this season, even when they were down by like 30 to Michigan State. I thought they were still giving a good effort. So I think the effort will be there. If they can, as you mentioned, find a way to get just consistent offense, find a way to get their pace going, it'll be a battle, but it'll come down to the little things, hitting the free throws, grabbing the rebounds. I mean, sometimes it just lacks off for them. And if they can get a full effort in this one, I like it to be a battle. I think the 1 point favorite for Dayton is just about right. Dayton can easily go in there and blow them out if they're not playing well. But if they're playing well, I think this will be a close game.
Do we already have NIT betting odds?
There are. Yes, 1 point favorite for Dayton.
God. Do we have CBI betting odds? I know that's totally off topic, but like, can I bet on North Texas, like whatever schools in the CBI this year? That's what I really want to do.
You can bet on the Army. You just, yeah, you can. I'm sure there's a way to bet on the Army somehow.
Yeah, I know
Gotta look
Army's
that up
in the
after this.
CBI.
Yeah, can I bet on UC Riverside to play in both?
You can
Nope.
bet on. I think. Oh yeah, FAU played Jacksonville. They're in there. So I mean, I'm actually, but I'm glad that with the way the NIT turned out, they're going into this season, people weren't sure if mid majors would even really be in the tournament. They thought it would just be a way for Power Fives to continue their season or whatnot. But it turned out to be, and sorry, NIT, the Power Fives don't want to play until April or whatever. So good for both these programs. Let's see who comes out there and gives it their best effort and wins this one. Does anyone know how the second round works?
No, that's a good question.
If I'm assuming Dayton will host if they win, but FAU doesn't have a seed, and if they win, does it stay in Boca? Do they go to Middle Tennessee or?
No, I think the only reason why they're hosting is because Dayton has the first 4 of those same days. I think for the most part, they would have to go on the road after this.
Okay.
Largely because I think they may be the last unseeded team in. Or I don't know how the seeding works.
There's no seeding. There's no numbers next to anyone's names except like the top 4 teams. So it just makes no sense to me. But hey, that's the NIT.
The only thing less convoluted than the NIT bracketology is finding out how you put in a bubble team in the NCAA tournament. But we can get into that on a different episode. I'm still a little bit upset about who they put in over Boise State.
Maybe next year we can talk about the bubble. Hopefully we're allowed to talk about the bubble more next year on these podcasts. It's not a bubble.
I hope I don't have to talk about the bubble next year, actually. I think Dayton fans and FAU fans all agree that next year we would rather not talk about the bubble at all.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be ideal. All right, last question for you guys. Cole, who's going to be the X Factor player-wise for Dayton in this one?
X Factor. That's a good question. Maybe, I mean, like, they're definitely just going to need production from Nate Santos, obviously. And they're going to need consistent guard play. Maybe Javon Bennett. I'd say, one of the guards, obviously, stepping up, helping out Nate Santos besides just Enoch Cheeks. Either Malachi Smith or Javon Bennett. I'd say one of them.
Kevin, for FAU, who's stepping up and winning them this game?
I wanted to say Devin Vanderpool, but I don't think that he's going to score 9 points and play fanatical defense for another 25 minutes or whatever, right? Like, I think he's still sort of learning his role. Give me Nico Moretti. Yeah. I think he's looked good in games like this, in games against solid competition. He looked really good against Indiana State, or like very early in the year. I think that was November. Wow,
that was the first game of the year.
Wow, November. But I think Nico Moretti and Trey Carroll are probably like the quote unquote X factors outside of the Baba Miller, Caleb Glenn, Matas trio, which I would argue is probably their 3 best players.
We shall see. 7 p.m. FAU Eleanor R. Baldwin Arena taking on Dayton. Probably one of the, outside of the Memphis game last year, I'd say it's the biggest game maybe hosted at FAU Stadium in basketball. I don't know. I don't want to put too much value to the NIT, but it's still a postseason game nonetheless. So I'm hoping the athletic department puts together a last minute tailgate, let the students go crazy in the parking lot, and let's get a good atmosphere in there. Probably the last game, as Kevin mentioned, at the stadium. So we shall see. If you're at the game, go crazy. If you're not at the game, stand up and watch, because that's what Cole Adams would tell you to do. But
Cole, will you be standing up and watching the Dayton FAU NIT?
No comment. I don't want their fans mad at me.
Yeah. The Dayton fans we don't want to get them too mad at Cole, but we know here, he'll be rooting on. He'll be rooting on.
I will be rooting for them. We'll see what happens. I really do hope they at least give an effort. I want to see them at least get to George Mason. That's at least what I would like to see, because then at least gives me a little bit of postseason play, and then we'll let whatever happens if they play Mason.
Hypothetically, if they beat George Mason and win the NIT, does that change the mood with Dayton fans whatsoever?
If anything, I think it might make things worse. As crazy as that's, I think it might make things worse.
So is this a situation where it's like if they lose early, it's like, whatever, right? Like we could
Yes.
just be mad about whatever happened in the regular season. But if they win it all, it's like, why couldn't we be doing this all season?
And it's not only just that, it's the fact that another thing, Xavier's going and playing in their arena, and Xavier's, they're a top rival with Dayton. It's just they don't play anymore because they moved to the Big East. So it's just like, it's just such a Dayton thing, just constantly getting kicked in the shin, that's just what happens.
What would be worse hypothetically, Dayton winning the NIT or an A10 team winning the NCAA tournament?
I would say it would probably be winning the NIT, because in the same breath, I feel like the fans were kind of happy for Duquesne last year once they got to like the NCAA tournament because they were playing on the opposite side. I definitely think there's like definitely there is an allegiance amongst the fans a little bit when it comes to when they're not playing each other. They do want to see each other kind of do well. So that's just like how I perceive it. Could be a little wrong on that maybe, but I definitely think that winning the NIT, hanging a banner for that would probably be a little frustrating amongst the fans. So that's just how I look at it. So,
all right, stake your claim. How far is Dayton going in the NIT?
I think they'll lose to George Mason.
I think that's probably a fair assumption. I can't see them winning it, but I could definitely see them getting.
I can't see them winning it either, because I don't want to necessarily even imagine that. And even though I'm not an NIT hater, like I like their tournament. I think it's a good thing. They've won it before, and in fact, when they've won it before, it wasn't like a time where the fans were like hating the NIT. The NIT used to be kind of cool. It's like, hey, we won the NIT. That's not like too bad. 15 years ago, but now it's got a whole different perception to it. So I'd say losing to George Mason would probably be like, it wouldn't even be a worst case scenario. I think that fans would just be kind of like whatever at that point.
Oh wow, Robbie left.
Well, I guess that's where we could probably end it on.
Yes, I will take over the hosting for this last part because Robbie's computer crashed out. Cole, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
Hopefully next year we're talking about an NCAA tournament appearance between these two teams, because I think that'd be far more exciting than an NIT game on the same day as the first four. But Cole, thanks for joining us, and I'm sure we'll talk to each other in the future.
Yeah. Thanks for asking me. We'll see how it plays out.
Of course, everyone, like the tweet that this is going to be under. Follow the Owl's Nest on Twitter. Follow all of us on Twitter. Follow Cole on Twitter. Great follow. And of course, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
I can't.